In this video, we're going to look at the Reformation that takes hold in England and then some of the consequences of the Reformation. This is one of the more interesting things we get to talk about. I think the events that transpire are cool. People tend to remember them. So we'll go ahead and talk about the Reformation that happens in England. So King Henry VIII of England, who we see pictured over here, had demonstrated that he was a devout Catholic by writing a denunciation of Luther's ideas in a 1521 tract titled In Defense of the Seven Sacraments, which led the Pope to bestow upon him the title of Defender of the Faith. And so these actions seem to indicate that England would remain Catholic and would be unshaken by the Reformation. But nevertheless, this anti-Catholic sentiment did exist in England. Earlier movements had decried the power of the Pope and called to an end to clerical abuses within the church. And the English Reformation was not prompted by religious issues, however, but by political concerns. So Henry was really unhappy with his wife, Catherine, because she had not produced him a male heir. And their only child was Mary, who would later become queen, and we'll talk about her in a little bit. Henry wanted to have his marriage to Catherine annulled so that he could marry another woman who hopefully would give birth to a son. And he had taken keen interest in another woman, Catherine's lady-in-waiting, Anne Boleyn. And although canon law did provide some justification for granting Henry an annulment, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, who happened to be Catherine's nephew, did not wish to see his aunt put aside or to lose a connection to the English government. So Charles is going to pressure Pope Clement VII to deny this annulment. Ultimately, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, and Principal Secretary Thomas Cromwell convinced Henry to seek an annulment through the British ecclesiastical courts. And in order to ensure that the annulment was granted, Parliament passed a law that cut off any appeals to Rome, thereby ending papal authority in England. So Cranmer then annulled the marriage to Catherine, and Henry secretly married Anne, who was already pregnant. We know that Anne is going to have a baby girl, and this baby girl will be later Queen Elizabeth. So 3 acts codified the break with Rome. The Act of Restraint and Appeals denied the Pope's authority. The Act of Supremacy claimed the king the head of the English Church, and the Act of Secession in 1534 required all subjects to take a loyalty oath to the king as the head of the church. After executing Anne for infidelity, Henry's then going to marry Jane Seymour, who died giving birth to his son, Edward VI. Henry then married Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr in that order. And you can see here, he divorces her and then he beheads Catherine. So at this time, it wasn't a very good idea to be the wife of King Henry VIII. As Lord Chancellor, Sir Thomas More served both political and spiritual advisor to the monarchy. More was a committed Catholic and had helped Henry VIII write his tract in the Defense of the Seven Sacraments, and therefore he's going to oppose a break from the Catholic Church. And the annulment of Henry's marriage to Catherine. He refused to attend the coronation ceremony of Anne Boleyn, which greatly angered Henry. And More then refused to acknowledge the Act of Secession or take the oath of supremacy that recognized the king as the head of the church. So Henry's going to see these acts as traitorous and ordered More executed. He was beheaded on July 6, 1535, and the Catholic Church viewed More as a martyr and eventually made him a saint in 1935. If you recognize this name, Sir Thomas More is famous for writing a book called Utopia. In our next section, we're going to look at these utopian movements and the inspiration of these authors on that movement. So, what were the changes in Henry's church? Well, it was a treason to say that the king was not the head of the Church of England. Henry is going to dissolve more than 600 monasteries. He issued the 10 Articles, which affirmed the basic tenets of Lutheranism and emphasized faith over works. And the 6 Articles, which were passed 2 years later, tended to assert Catholic teachings such as transubstantiation and clerical celibacy. So in many ways, the substance of Catholicism remains in England, so much that Henry actually had a Catholic Mass said for him when he died. So look at the structure of the church, what he did. and then the theology behind it. Still maintains that Catholic doctrine in there. Despite protests from some who still supported Catholicism, English monasteries were dissolved under the leadership of Thomas Cromwell. And not only did the monarchy benefit financially from the sales, but many nobles purchased the former monastic properties and increased their land holdings as a result. The real Reformation and religious struggle in England is going to develop after Henry's death. So Henry initiates it by splitting officially with the Catholic Church, but then his heirs are going to carry out the true Reformation. So King Edward VI moves the country toward Protestantism, following in his father's footsteps. Mary I goes back in the direction of Catholicism, and Elizabeth I again towards Protestantism. So you have Protestant, then back to Catholic, then back to Protestantism. And we're going to look at kind of what that looked like under each one. So Edward VI was only 10 when he takes the throne in 1547. And since he was underage and when he inherited the throne, a regency council ruled for him instead of letting a 10-year-old make the decisions. His uncle, Edward Seymour, however, seized control of the regency and ruled as Lord Protector on his behalf. Under the influence of his uncle and his advisors, Edward's rule witnessed the strengthening of Protestantism in England. So Archbishop Cranmer oversaw the implementation of many Protestant ideas, such as allowing priests to marry, banning images and icons in church buildings, and instituting a formal liturgy that was used throughout the churches in England. One element of the liturgy that Cranmer instituted was the Book of Common Prayer. It was a collection of scripture readings and other elements of worship that outlined how the church service should be conducted. And by standardizing Sunday services throughout England, the Book of Common Prayer provided English Protestantism with a sense of unity and reaffirmed the monarchical control of religion in England. Edward VI was sickly, and so when he dies, his sister, Mary I, is going to take over as Queen of England. So Mary was the daughter of Catherine of Aragon, King Henry VIII's first wife, and she's married to King Philip II of Spain, who was also Catholic. So upon assuming the throne, she makes it clear that she intends to return the country to Catholicism. It's a development that generates a great deal of opposition. And during her reign, she reinstituted many Catholic practices. She reaffirmed the position of the Pope as head of the Church, and she also was determined to completely roll back the influence of the Reformation in England. And she had no qualms about executing Protestants, a practice that earns her the nickname Bloody Mary, and that's due to her execution of the Protestants within the Kingdom of England. Mary encouraged the restoration of Catholic worship practices and ordered her subjects to submit to the authority of the Catholic Church. She also abolished Protestant worship, and nobles feared that she would confiscate the former monastic lands that they had gained under Henry. Mary chose not to do this because she realized that she needed the support of the nobility. Mary again moved against Protestants who refused to return to Catholicism, and she had some 300 of them executed, including most for heresy, burning them at the stake. This includes former Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer. Ultimately, Mary's persecution had the opposite effect of what she intended. In England, actually, it was more Protestant at the end of her reign than at the beginning. So, her sister Elizabeth comes to power in 1558. Elizabeth was a Protestant, and though not particularly devout, she came to realize that she had to restore Protestantism and give it real substance in order to produce religious peace in England. So she moves to formalize certain key elements of church organization and doctrine. And in 1559, Parliament passed the Act of Uniformity and Act of Succession, which established the foundation for the Church of England. And the Church of England adopted Protestant doctrines and retained the organization and structure of the Catholic Church. Elizabeth also attempted to calm religious controversy by issuing 39 Articles, a document that outlined the broad creed of faith for the Anglican Church. She also formally endorsed the Common Book of Prayer, and the Anglican Church retention of some Catholic practices, such as altar rails and baptismal crosses, provoked some opposition from those who wanted to rid Anglicanism of all remnants of Catholicism. These dissenters organized and became known as Puritans, because they wanted to purify the Anglican Church and to remove all images of what the Catholic Church used to look like. Some Puritans advocated for the separation of church and state, but Elizabeth planned on using religion to further her own purposes, specifically as a tool for helping her promote unity throughout the country. And from that need to purify the church, we get the split between that group of Puritans, and we know we get the Pilgrims and the Puritans, the Pilgrims who want to separate completely from the Anglican Church, and the Puritans who want to fix it, which leads to the settlement of North America. See, history is always related. Let's look at some discussion questions. Number 1. The Protestant Reformation in England resulted in a new church organization for England, but the changes in doctrine and ritual were minor. How do the motives of King Henry VIII help explain this fact? Number 2. One historian says the story of England's Protestant Reformation in the 1500s is basically the story of King Henry VIII's children and their efforts to strengthen the English monarchy. Do you agree with this statement? Why or why not? Number 3. Explain how Queen Elizabeth's decisions about the Church of England were aimed more at producing unity in England than making a radical break with all aspects of Catholicism. In our next video, we're going to look at how the Catholic Church responds to all of this, because they're not going to be exactly quiet on these issues, and we'll look at the effects of that.